probably the big game of the early window, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. Uh, wow. Crazy back and forth game for most of the game. It was tied at 10, I believe, after the third quarter. Wisconsin scores a field goal early in the fourth. Notre Dame runs the ensuing kickoff back for a touchdown, and then it just explodes from there. Notre Dame finishes the game 41-13. A game played in Soldier Field, kind of an interesting, a little bit of a unique atmosphere. Um, yeah, I have thoughts on this, obviously, as a Notre Dame fan. What are your thoughts as the neutral observer?
Well, just if someone who didn't watch this game just looks at the box score, it looks like a blowout. It wasn't. It wasn't at all. Wisconsin actually led early in the fourth quarter. A few pick sixes late just kind of ran up the score, but it was a good game. Graham Mertz was not good. There's not many other ways to say it. He overthrew receivers on the deep balls a lot. He had some guys running open and just simply missed throws. So if you're Wisconsin, I don't know. It looks so bad. That looks so bad when the quarterback on the other side is actually playing decently well, and Jack Cohn, and that's the guy that you release. And Graham Mertz has just not played well. Yeah, the Irish were able to really kind of stop the run. Chaz Malusi, who's a talented running back, I don't think anyone would argue with that, but he was really bottled up for the most part, just really limited success. So hey, really good Irish defense. Not a great Irish offensive line. We've talked about this will, and we will continue to talk about their offensive line issues. But this is big. This is a big win for Notre Dame. We mentioned kind of early as we were previewing Notre Dame in the preseason. They have four really big games, um, and hey, another one down. That's another one down. So yeah, Cincinnati's up next. It's going to be fun. I want to see. Yeah, hopefully the offensive line just gels a little bit more because they were giving up. Wisconsin has a good defense. They do. They can really get after the passer. They've always really been able to, but they were able to get after Jack Cohn with regularity today.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame gave up 6 sacks. At one point, they had their fourth left tackle for the season in the game, and then they ended up going back to the number 3 guy. But they've had 4 different left tackles play this year. 2 of them are true freshmen. 2 of them are redshirt freshmen. So lots of talent there, just very young, needs to be developed clearly. Jeff Quinn, the offensive line coach, under a lot of heat. They had 2 rushing yards in this game and somehow won, which is just crazy. To say that about a Notre Dame team, it completely goes against everything that kind of Notre Dame is known for. And I'm not hating on it necessarily. Obviously I don't appreciate the offensive line play, but I do think there's a faction of the fan base that is all about just run the dang ball all the time. And no, how about you just go ahead and put up points? And that's what football is about. I don't really care how the yards come, whether they be passing or rushing. And there was a little bit of a stretch here today where Notre Dame, it seemed like they were a little bit too determined to run the ball. One of their second drive, I believe, they marched down the field mostly with the passing game. Their runs were getting nowhere. They get a first and goal at the 10-yard line, promptly run twice for like -3 yards, and then get sacked on third down. It was just, and then when Tommy Rees finally decided, okay, we need to pass the ball because that's all we can do successfully, they actually had some success through the air that way. Kevin Austin, after having 8 targets and 0 catches last week, showed up pretty big today, had 2 touchdowns. So that was huge. It was just good to see someone other than like Michael Mayer show up and make some plays in the passing game. Jack Cohn got hurt in this game, like the 5th time he got sacked. And and Tyler Buckner was unavailable because of his hamstring. So Drew Pine comes in. He's kind of been referred to as the true backup, while Tyler Buckner is the change of pace guy. I feel like that's kind of semantics, like Tyler Buckner is really truly the guy who Notre Dame is counting on in the future. But Pine showed up, looked pretty good in limited action, 6 of 8 passing, had the touchdown pass, looked solid. He's not very big, Doesn't have a huge cannon for an arm, but he does throw the ball from point A to point B very quickly. Like he's not going to throw it 60 yards down the field, but he'll throw a laser 15 yards down the field. Looked pretty good doing that. So I do think that these three quarterbacks on this roster, I do feel like they're not separated by a whole lot. Um, I don't think that the success of this season comes down to, say, the health of Jack Cohn or whoever they play at quarterback. I think the success of this season will depend more on offensive line play and the defense really like figuring it out this year. You mentioned the defense a little bit. I realize I'm a little bit rambling at this point, but I'm the Notre Dame guy, so I'm going to go ahead and talk. Um, Marcus Freeman has to feel really good. After 2 weeks, lots of people were doubting him, giving up big plays to Florida State and Toledo. They're no longer giving up big plays, and they totally shut down Wisconsin's run game today, I would say. It gave up a few runs, but nothing crazy. And they had a lot of stuffs. I'm interested to see some of like the stuff rate and stuff because he was really good today. And Cam Hart, the converted receiver turned corner, 2 impressive interceptions today. The other 2, the pick sixes, were by linebackers, back in the end of the game when Wisconsin had to throw the ball. I don't put as much stock into those, of course, but the 2 by Cam Hart, he came to play today. I think he's kind of turning into, after Kyle Hamilton, I think he's now the kind of the next guy in that secondary that they can actually rely on. And also, it should be mentioned that they kind of shut down Wisconsin's running game without Kurt Heinisch, the starting nose tackle, today. So they have lots of depth on the defensive line. Probably not a lot of first-round draft picks, but they have lots of guys that are going to be in NFL camps, like 10 of them or something like that. So, yeah, I was impressed by Notre Dame today. Not sure how it changes my outlook on the season just because the offense still wasn't great. But I guess I'll put that to you as someone who's a little more neutral here. What can this Notre Dame team be?
So I think you're going to try to compare them to last year's team, who obviously had a really successful season, made the playoff, right? And they're not that. Like it's not you're kind of disqualified from the playoff just purely because of the offensive line. I would almost say like there's a level, they're not at that level. But I think I hate to say that they can't get there. I think they could get there. I think the defense has really come a long ways. We were a big Marcus Freeman podcast, and just the way that they've changed from that first game against Florida State and the way they looked in that game to the way they look today. Granted, you're playing Graham Mertz, I understand. Flying around, they made mistakes, but then they recovered from their mistakes and kind of grew up, kind of in almost in the course of the game. They really matured. So, I mean, 10-2, I think was their over under. We did season over unders, win total over unders, I think for almost every team, and I went over. I think 9.5 might have been their number. 10-2 is very attainable. North Carolina and USC don't look nearly as good as what they looked, say 3 weeks ago. And you have a Cincinnati game that's not maybe as scary given as what we saw them play when they played last week against Indiana. So every game's winnable. I mean, they really are. Like they're not going to be blown off the field, I don't think, by anyone. I still don't think that the top end is there. We talk about, where's your ceiling at? For me, I would still have questions about their ceiling, but I'd say they have a pretty high floor. I'd feel fairly confident in 10 wins.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think my prediction, depending at what point of the offseason I was talking and who I was talking to, it was either 10-2 or 11-1. I did feel pretty good about the team after hearing some of the reports from fall camp. But I did not expect the offensive line to be this bad, clearly. Now, you did mention they're not really a playoff level team. But here's my question. Are there more than 2 playoff level teams this year?
I mean, I would say Oregon probably is right now. And you could argue, I think we'll find out when they play when Notre Dame plays Cincinnati. I think a lot will be found out then, because Cincinnati has the potential, maybe given this is a crazy year, right? Like all the good teams look bad, it seems like. I mean, we're watching all the really good teams struggle. So, why not? And I would say okay, and I am a Georgia fan. I am biased here, but Georgia or Alabama would handle, I think, Notre Dame right now. And but I don't really think that's an indictment against Notre Dame. Like, I don't think there's. I think they'd handle most teams. I think Georgia and Alabama would handle almost anyone else. So I think it's going to be a growing process between now and the end of the year. And I think by the end of it, there will be a couple of teams that kind of reach up into that category and snag a couple playoff spots. We'll see. Like, it could very well be Notre Dame. 11-1 is very attainable. You'd hate to say they're going to go undefeated. It might be a little bit, of an overreaction after today, but it's possible. It really is. Like, who's out there that you're just like, okay, we have no chance against them? You think you can win every game if you're Notre Dame from here on out, and that's a great place to be because there's a lot of schools that are just not at that place right
Yeah, it definitely feels like this is like when you just like look at this team, watch them play, they just kind of feel like a 9 or 10 win team. But the problem is there's very few teams that feel like 12 win teams. And so maybe the Notre Dame Cincinnati winner is like on the inside track to the playoff. Like, obviously, that's a big statement for a group of five team, even, or even this Notre Dame team. They still have to go to Virginia Tech. You mentioned USC, North Carolina. But I don't think there's a team left on this schedule that Notre Dame will not be favored against. So yeah, like I think this is all leading towards Alabama and Georgia playing twice. I know they're not scheduled to play each other at all, but I think SEC championship game, and then again probably in the national championship. And I could see two teams just getting waxed in semifinals, and everyone will say, "Oh, they were overrated. They didn't belong in the playoff." But then there's like, you'll be like, "Who should have been in the playoff then?" Because they probably would have gotten waxed too. So yeah, I don't think that Notre Dame matches our idea of what a playoff team should look like this year. But I also don't know that there's a whole lot of teams that do, and I could see them making the playoff depending on just kind of how all this shakes out. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw today. I guess surprise may even be a strong word. I think I expected Notre Dame to win this game. I did predict that, just not on the pod, but privately. But I didn't think it would be like this. And like you mentioned, this was not actually a blowout like the score suggests. But I also felt like at no point did I feel like Wisconsin's offense was anywhere close to taking over this game. At no point was I like, there's no way Notre Dame is going to win this. It felt semi-comfortable for a game that was close the entire way.
No, that's a fair statement. I would have had the same feeling. At no point was Notre Dame not covering. We'll say
Yeah.
we both had Notre Dame in our locks of the week. So, which again, by the way, that felt like an easy number. Like that number, even I know it's easy to say now the game's over, but even then, it just felt like a bad number. I'm not sure where the Wisconsin love came from, but apparently it came from somewhere. We were not on that bandwagon. But to your point, real quick, just about two teams, and I'm a Georgia fan, and rat poison. Nick Saban talks about rat poison. That's rat poison. We don't like our all of our positive news clippings. There is a very good chance that a couple of teams grow into competition by the year's end. I would agree that no team probably is competition right now. It's a long ways yet. Injuries are going to happen. Hey, this year is going to happen. These games are going to happen, and teams are going to grow, and teams are going to mature into better teams, and some teams will get worse. So I just want to see it play out. It's going to be a crazy year. I think there's going to be a lot of silly stuff going on. Talk about Cincinnati. This next game between Notre Dame and Cincinnati, and we'll talk about this more in our preview pod. Huge game for both schools. Massive game. That is, absolutely huge. Cincinnati has a chance to really kind of reach up and grab a playoff spot. It doesn't really look like they'll have any other competition the rest of their regular season. So just, yeah, again, we'll get into this more, but I am jacked up for next Saturday. Next Saturday is absolutely loaded. Yeah, can't wait.
Amen to that.